Last November, 8 or so months ago, Be Quiet launched their first PC case, which is the Silent Base 800. This case here is a subtle revision of that model. It adds a window, and it is the Silent Base 800 window. Now you have to hope, don't you, that if a company takes 8 months to come up with a relatively minor modification such as a window, or let's call it an enhancement, you have to hope it's going to be flipping good. We'll come to that in a moment. The curious thing is that for me, actually, the bigger thing is that the case I saw those 8 months ago was the all black model. And this time around, I've got the black and orange version, these orange highlights here, which is, let's face it, it's a trivial difference, and I really like it. It helps that Be Quiet colour coordinates the accessories that come with the case. These are rubber drive rails. And when you open the case, you get sort of this little flash of orange going on, as well as the tinges on the front. The window, to my mind, helps that slightly because, of course, you can see just that little bit more that's going on. So anyway, let's take a quick tour of the case, and then I'll dive inside and we'll see what we see. Incidentally, the box over here is a standard Be Quiet 800 Silent Base box, because they don't yet have packaging for the windowed version. So it is going to be subtly different, presumably including a window. Anywho, it's an ATX tower, relatively tall. It stands on these chunky skids, which aren't strictly necessary. They just kind of add stability. When I was building the system, I actually had the skids removed. They just plug in and plug out. And the box actually seemed quite stable to me. But nonetheless, having them on there doesn't do any harm. We've got the window that you can see over there in that camera. At the rear of the case, we have this fairly substantial air filter that pulls out above the power supply. Let's just take off the windowed panel, because I bet that's going to reflect like crazy. Oh, thumb screws. Did I ever fail to drop a thumb screw? And then we'll turn that back round. And pull off the second panel. Now, this is stating the crashingly obvious, but the original 800 had these two Be Quiet vent panels which you can pop out and you can replace with a fan. Clearly the windowed panel, you don't get that option, so you now have lost with this windowed version one fan mount, which is just one of those things. Now if we take the windowed panel, and I'll just try and flex it, and it is surprisingly rigid. Plenty of windowed panels, they cut a hole in a piece of steel, whack in a piece of clear polycarbonate or some such, bit of self-adhesive tape sometimes they sort of fold over little tabs to hold it in place. Often the engineering of a window is actually pretty crude. In this case, they've absolutely gone to town, have Be Quiet. We've got a dozen screws around the sides holding on this sandwich, I would say it is actually, of clear material. It looks like polycarbonate to me. And there's a rubber gasket to stop any hint of vibration between the window and the steel. And the gasket is orange to match the front of the case and the silicon drive rails, and also the cable management grommets in the motherboard tray. So, neat touch. The window itself is a large window, and it shows off pretty much the entire interior, as you'll see in our photos on Kit Guru. And for me that raises a question mark, because one of the points I made when I originally reviewed the Silent Base 800 is that when you open the case, your cables are kind of on show. You don't have any you don't have a power supply cover to conceal them. They're pretty much here. You can pull them through to the back of the case, and there is a decent amount of cable management space, but it's a bit of a juggling act, because there's, depending on how you measure it, 22 to 25 mil of space, which is okay. More than 20 mil is okay. 30 mil is huge. We're in that sweet spot. But if you have right-angled SATA power connections like this, they sit in place. It depends where you want to put them. They'll sit, and they'll sit just about okay. You do need to be a little cautious in where you position the cables. So pulling cables through here, fine. You can see there's pretty much everything on the back. And that means that down the bottom we have, not exactly messy, but essentially the cables are there. Now ordinarily with a regular side panel, absolutely not an issue. With a windowed panel, you've really got to try and keep any junk down in that bottom section, just to avoid any nastiness. As it happens, when I first did this build, I used some red SATA cables, and that just looked fairly frightful because I found it tricky to get the bends neat and tidy. The black ones I find just vanish and are pretty much invisible. Anyway, if we turn to the front of the case, other than the window and also this actually, going to the bag of accessories, this cable here is the only other change that I actually spotted between the original 800 and this windowed version. This extension cable was connected to the rear fan, the rear 120 exhaust fan, which I don't quite understand because the cable on that fan is about that long, which is all the length you need to attach to anywhere you want on your motherboard. I didn't need any extra. I don't understand what that's about. It's a 3-pin to 3-pin. It seemed to be entirely superfluous to me. Clearly Be Quiet thinks that some people need a longer cable. On the other hand, the two front 140 fans, which I'll show you in just a second, I ended up connecting them to that point there on the ASRock Z97 killer motherboard, and they basically run straight across the back here, through a cable management grommet, and across the front there above the graphics card. It's okay. I mean, when you go into the middle of a motherboard, you don't get a lot of option about keeping things neat and tidy. That works okay. But if I wanted any extra cabling, I'd want it on those front fans because they have to kind of be routed to reach. And if you've got some discrete connectors down the bottom, a bit of extra cabling might help. The rear fan, didn't feel any need. Anyway, what we do with the lower stealth door is we push, and you can see we've got some sound deadening material inside. And we have an air filter. Now this clips in place. It's a little bit of a fiddle. Just comes out like so, and that reveals two 140mm Be Quiet fans, which have these orange silicon sort of little mounts, all very neat and tidy. When you put the filter back in, you do need to just take a degree of care to clip it in firmly because the door latches into the air filter. And then at the top we have another stealth door which covers the 4 optical drive bays. I've used one of them, as you can see. There's a reason why they've gone, by many standards, bonkers with 4 bays, because after all, who needs 4 bays? 1, 2 is plenty, 3, 4, no, not really. And the reason is that you can remove this drive tower. It sits here ordinarily. We've got 4 drive bays in the bottom tower, 3 in the top, total of 7. Remove some thumb screws, you can slide the tower out. This is the one you're likeliest to remove because it's in line with your main graphics card slot. Now, as it happens, this Palette GTX 780 graphics card, I can, if I choose, slide the tower back in place. It will go because the palette is big but not enormous, like so. Whereas the Sapphire R9290 Trix graphics card I often use is actually a tad longer. It's about 1 inch longer. And that is too long to go in with this drive tower in place. So you can use a big graphics card, but not an enormous graphics card with the drive tower in place. However, you have an option, which is that you can go to the front, you can whip out the optical drive tower, and you can put your 3-bay drive tower in place up top. You have to invert it and you screw it down, but it works. It's a surprising setup. So you slide it on the rails, thumb screws, job done. I'm not sure how many drives you think you'll need because, as I say, we've got 4 drives here, 4 drive bays here, and 2 SSDs on the back. I'm not quite clear why you necessarily require this 3 at all. The idea you want to move the 3 up to the top. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It strikes me that that is only of vital importance to you if you're going to gut the front of the case and replace the stock fans, which you may well do, of course, particularly if you're installing a radiator. However, it would seem to me that the likeliest thing to do is to leave the front well alone, take out the 3 drive bays if you like, open it up. If you really want, take out the 4 as well, completely open the front, but I'm not sure why you'd necessarily bother unless you've got some devious plans. And then you can put your cooling in the roof because the roof of the case is open and ready for business. Now, I've put in here a Corsair H100i liquid cooler, which is the 240mm radiator. You can actually put, if you want a pair of 140mm fans or a 280 radiator, but that would be to me a little bit too much like hard work. The 240, I had a certain amount of latitude with positioning, and I chose to move it off center, so it's kind of away from the motherboard a little. A 280, it's going where it's going, and at this end of things, because I left the optical drive bay in place, I was restricted on how my hoses were going to route. Take the optical drive bay out, it's an open field, heaps of space. Anyway, the way I did it, leaving these drive bays in place, I ended up putting the radiator on the inside of the case and the fans on the outside inside the roof. I didn't have enough space to put the fans and the radiator outside, and I didn't want to have the fans and the radiator both inside, because that would have encroached on the edge of the motherboard tray. On the edge of the motherboard even. So I've ended up with the fans pulling from the outside of the case, and then the air is exhausting inside the roof. It works well, and it's also quite quiet. But you do not have the option for putting any cooling you want anywhere you like. You do need to pick and choose a little bit. But as I say, that's at least in part because I chose to leave the optical drive bays in place. Seems like a reasonable decision to me. Cable management is okay. The grommets are slightly peculiar things. You've got 4 cable management holes, these whacking great grommets that kind of have a flappy sort of thing going on, and that means that with the big cables, PCI Express graphics, 8-pin EPS and main 24-pin, you pull them through, they just go where they're going to go. The lighter cables, particularly I found the SATA cables, because they're so thin, there was a little bit of resistance. It's almost like the rubber's trying to push them back a tad. Not a big deal. I found it was something to be slightly cautious about. The other thing is the side panels, when they go on, they're a put in and slide forward job. And again, depending on where your cabling is, you can it's perfectly possible that setup to slightly move things. But the end result is fairly tidy. I'm going to have to say, ecstatic with the build. Partly because I have to run cables across the power supply and across the foot of the motherboard. I don't have any option for feeding through holes at the back here because there isn't one. And similarly, the EPS power connector, I had to put that through an opening at the top of the case, sort of hook it around the top of the motherboard and then put the motherboard in place. Because although the case is quite tall with this top compartment, if you kind of remove this from the equation, you end up with a standard height, and also take the feet out of the equation. The actual case isn't enormous. If it was a bit taller, you could maybe have a cable management window at the top and put your EPS connector through that. But in a way, there's an optical illusion going on here. It looks big and tall. In actual fact, the roof and the feet are adding something to the impression of size. The actual main chassis is not huge. So I had to route that cable to the top of the board first. That worked well. Everything else hooked up nicely. Happy. Drives. Just going back to that, it's worth showing you because I removed this 3-bay setup here. If I just take this out. So the way you install drives, you take your 3.5-inch drive, you take your bag of drive rails, and God love them, be quiet, gives you many, and also a great big bag of thumb screws. And you attach a rubber rail to either side of the drive, making sure you put the rounded end that's going to slide in first. You then slide your drive in the standard way, just like a drawer in a filing cabinet, and it goes home like so. And then, and this is the clever bit I think, you lock that down like so, and now it's securely in place. Now, you cannot say that's tool-free because, of course, you have to first attach the rails, and although they are thumb screws, you do need to use a screwdriver. It's not really practical to do it another way. But once the drive is in place, that is, I was going to say solidly mounted, but that's incorrect. I mean, in the sense of it's securely mounted, but absolutely it's suspended on those rubber side rails. It's a very neat way of doing things that it's not exactly laborious. It requires a tad of work. You do need to make sure you get the rails the correct way round, but slide it home, lock it down. That drive is going absolutely nowhere. I like that. That's good. And rubber mounting drives, always something that pleases me. On the other hand, of course, as we move to 2.5 SSDs, and particularly as SSDs get large in capacity, that's going to become a thing of the past. But for the time being, you want a data drive or two, very likely, and that is a good mounting mechanism I thoroughly approve of. The manual, it's multilingual. I count 8 languages. And there is a fair amount of information, but it's not massively clearly laid out. So for example, the English section at the front, you get an exploded diagram that tells you what the bits are. That works well. And then the actual buildy part is towards the rear, and that splits up so each picture has captions in many, many languages. So it's telling you, for example, that you can reverse the door on the front, or indeed remove it entirely, how you remove the hinges. Now, you don't need a great deal of information about that, but it's just a pure line drawing with a single line of text for each of the kind of captions. As I say, 8 languages, so 1 line for English and then 7 for the other languages. It's a pretty good manual. They're decent diagrams. I personally like to see it just with the bit you're looking at, just either circled or a different colour. Just emphasise which screw I'm taking out. Just help me a little bit. That, I would have to say, is an absolutely trivial point. So overall, the window, it's good, it's solid, it works. It doesn't make the case significantly noisier, which is important because, of course, be quiet. The emphasis is on quiet. The fans even say be quiet. You've got 2 140s at the front, a 120 at the rear, plus whatever CPU cooling you're installing. If the window is emitting noise, then it's pretty much, on this side we've got noise deadening material. In the door in the front you've got noise deadening material. If the window's letting it all out the other side, you've pretty much missed the point, haven't you? It works well. They've done a decent job. I'm happy with their quality. It is worth noting that although, as I look here at this window, it's absolutely clear, albeit a little bit dusty, depending on how you have the case oriented, I actually found you got a kind of rainbow hue thing going on. I don't know if that's the plastic itself, I don't know if that's something to do with the thickness of the material, some sort of diffraction thing going on, or what it is precisely, but depending on how you have it, or a bit like when you have drops of oil or petrol on a puddle, it was that look. In a sense, actually quite nice, but of course if you want to look through the window at the innards of your PC, not what you're after. But looking at it now, it's crystal clear. Money, we have to discuss money. The basic Silent Base 800 case, £99.95, which actually is the price it launched at, and that price has remained consistent. You can buy, if you wish, the window panel on its own for £24.99, £25. So if you have a Silent Base 800, £25 to buy the window panel, which actually strikes me as fairly reasonable. Or you can buy this windowed version for just under it's £119. So basically 20 quid for the window panel. Obviously it's easier shipping it with the case and having to send you a separate package. That strikes me as reasonable. The problem here is that in the past 8 months I've seen a decent array of cases, some of which are luxurious for £120 and some of which are pretty blooming good for £80. This case falls betwixt and between. It's good. It has some features I like. You can build a really tidy PC inside this. It works. There's nothing there you're not going to like. The emphasis on the styling and quiet, and it works. It's not delivering anything I haven't seen before. That's really the thing. I like the styling, but in terms of features, it's a decent case. And that means that the price seems to be a little bit too high. If it was £80, clearly that would be a bargain. On the other hand, £119, that is quite a lot of cash. If they could get it to £99, i.e. add the window in for the same price as the basic 800, that would definitely interest me quite a lot. Anyway, this is an update to the Be Quiet Silent Base 800. It's got a window, it's a smart piece of kit, it shows off your PC building skills, and I'm impressed by this one. It doesn't completely blow me away, but it's definitely a handy and well overdue upgrade for Be Quiet's first gaming case. So this is Leah Wardop for Kit Guru.